Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CSPI podcast. I'm here today with a special guest. This is with Jonah Davids, who's our communications director at CSPI. Today's conversation is going to be sort of partly retrospective on what we've done in the last year, partly telling you a little bit about Jonah and a recent essay he wrote about why he left academia and why maybe you should too if you're also in academia. And then sort of just some discussion about where we are, where we've been, what we've done, and what we're going to do in the next year. So we're recording this on December 30th. We're probably going to release it in the coming days. So it's end of the year, so it's a good time to reflect on what's going on, our accomplishments, and sort of double down on what's working, discard what's not working, and move forward. So with that said, Jonah, how are you today?
I'm good, Richard. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I think even your story I think is sort of valuable to tell because you were just a guy when you reached out to me. You were what were you? You were an undergrad, right?
Yeah, I think I was an undergrad in my third year, maybe fourth year.
Uh,
But just a normal undergrad at a, not well-known university or anything like that. Just reached out to you because I saw what you guys were doing at CSPI, the kind of stuff focused on institutions and also the political psychology stuff just, seemed right up my alley. So, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, reaching out to people and just trying to talk to them is underrated. So it's funny because I used to reach out to people before I sort now I reach out to people. People will always respond because I have a little bit of notoriety. But before I was anybody, which was not that long ago, which was a year or two ago, I was just some rando. Uh, I would reach out to like academics, like random academics. And often they wouldn't respond, right? But then like Steven Pinker and like Jonathan Haidt would respond. So I
Mhm.
had email relationship with them before I was a public figure. And I found that the people who actually are most busy, who you think would have least time for you, are often the ones. It's just the opposite. They're successful because they are so outgoing and energetic, and they give of themselves. Robert Jervis, who I worked with Columbia, was like this too. He just recently passed away, but he's one of the probably the most influential was the most influential person in international relations. He was always generous with his time. I worked with him at Columbia. Richard Posner, who's I think the most cited federal judge in history. I reached out to. I brought him to an event at the University of Chicago Law School when I was there, so he was always generous with his time. His son Eric was my professor. I knew him too. The professor's a little different. Richard Posner. I was just reaching out to him. So basically, famous people have always, on a per person basis, famous people have always responded to me and given more time and interest in my work even before I was anybody than non-famous people. So reaching out to people is underrated, and I think you should do it. And I think Jonah did that, and he was able to come on and start working for us. Is that do you have any thoughts on that, Jonah?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I mean, sometimes people will tell you that at university, they'll be like, if you like an academic, reach out and write to them. But it's something that just like I've always done. Even before I met you, I had like correspondence with Eric Kaufman. I think I talked to Robert Plomin a few times. Just yeah, it's like because I'm curious, I've got questions, and they want to actually answer them. So that's good. I think people think I'm not even worthy of this person's time
Yeah,
until I've got X credential or until I've written X number of papers, and it's like. No,
yeah.
like if you have an interesting question or perspective or something, or even if you just want advice. I mean, people love to give advice, right? So ask for some advice or something. It usually works out, and then you never know, right? What opportunities will come of it.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, people have reached out to CSPI. We've done work with them just on random sort of reaching out. I mean, if you've got something interesting, don't. I think a good thing the internet does. I think this the culture of CSPI, which is sort of the culture of I think a lot of different people like the rationalist community, bloggers. This is a sort of a Silicon Valley thing too. They're just more open to there's less concern with formality. There's less concern with sort of hierarchy or status or climbing. I mean, you have people who are genuinely interested in ideas and truth. They just naturally care less about that stuff because they know there's not a perfect or maybe even a very good correlation between people's status and then the quality of their ideas, which is one of the things we keep going back to. Um, Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So that I mean, this has worked out. You help with CSPI. You help produce the podcast. You edit our work. You help sort of make this help this operation run. And and other people have reached out and they've also done work for CSPI. So anyone who's interested in what we're doing or thinks what we're doing is cool, just reach out. There's nothing to there's no loss there, and something good might come of it. So you're a Canadian, right? Where'd you grow up? Was it Toronto?
I grew up in Toronto. Yeah, that's where I am now as well.
Okay. And so to tell us about your decision, because your essay got a little bit of attention, and I think it's, I went through, I finished my PhD recently in 2018, and you know, I, I don't, nobody likes to say they regret it, like they regret, like there's a sunk cost fallacy, right? But yeah, I think I should have spent less time in school. I'll just admit that. I think I spent too much time in school, and I think I could have been doing what I was doing earlier. And so I think it's important to sort of communicate that message to people. So can you tell a little bit about your story, why you decided to go to graduate school, and why you sort of soured on it, and how?
Sure. Well, like I did my undergrad at Ryerson University in Toronto here. Um, and I studied psychology just because I've always been really interested in sort of people, why they do what they do, why we're all so crazy and miserable, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and when I first started, I was really into like therapy, like mental health and that kind of thing. And as I like started studying it more and more, I just realized like, oh, like almost everything is kind of a placebo. Like most of the science and stuff behind this is really just stories. And that kind of got me more interested in like the sort of how and why of social science. Like, why do we spend so much time reading books on it and thinking about it and doing it? And like, is it actually any good? Is it worth anything? And so I kind of had those kinds of thoughts and doubts kind of bubbling up or during my undergrad. Really interested in the replication crisis and open science and all that stuff. But I thought, as a person who's kind of like interested in social science and understanding, social research, I sort of thought, okay, well, the only thing I can really do is go to graduate school, right? There's no like job I can get at a place that's gonna sort of tick those boxes. So, I did a lot of like work RAing, being a research assistant and that kind of thing. And then I got into graduate school at the University of Amsterdam, which is the program I was in was communication science. And it's like the number one ranked place in the world, which I'll admit like that really got me. I was like, whoa, I got into this
Yeah.
number one ranked place. That's amazing, right? The Harvard of, of communication science. Um, so I went
Is it
there
better than
and
Harvard? Does Harvard have a communications? If you got into actually Harvard for
probably,
communications,
probably not.
okay.
I
Is
mean,
it just
there
not?
probably there probably are people there who like study, political communication or whatever, but I don't know if
There's
they
not a
actually have
communications
it.
PhD, or there if there is, it's not as good as University of Amsterdam.
Apparently not. I know UPenn has like a joint political science communications PhD, which I think is maybe like the more maybe I don't know well respected in the U.S. At least. But in terms
Uh,
of the world, I actually think it's fair to say that University of Amsterdam, there's a lot of strong communications researchers who kind of pass through there or work there, and I think it's probably one of the more famous departments in that world for a number of reasons. So anyway, I was like, okay, great. So I went there, and just within like the first couple of weeks or whatever of being in graduate school, like something just felt really off to me. The first thing I kind of noticed was that the other people around me who were my friends, and some of them still are my friends, um, we kind of had a similar story, which is like all of us were smart people interested in what makes people tick and communication and politics and that sort of thing. But none of us had like a very good idea of like why we were there. Like it's not obvious what a degree in communication science gets you in life.
so when I was in my program, I mean, there was an obvious answer. We all wanted to be professors because we were studying for the PhD, but that wasn't what they were. That's not what University of Amsterdam was, right? It's
No,
a
I mean
master's.
there were a few people there who were like, I want a PhD.
Yeah,
And I was actually one of those people because I was like, yeah, that's why I'm here too. I'm going to do this and I'll get a PhD.
yeah.
But the more I kind of thought about it, like that's not really answering the question why you're here. It's deferring it. You're basically saying like, okay, I know at some point I want to do some kind of research or whatever, but it's going to be years and years from now, and until
Yeah,
then,
but
I'm
that's
just
an
going to.
answer, though. I mean, if you're gonna get, if you're gonna get a PhD and you want to be a professor, you want to be. That's a goal, right?
Well, nobody said. People I talked to didn't say they wanted to be professor. Maybe I should have clarified that. It
Yeah,
was just
that's
like I
that's the
want to
thing.
get
Yeah.
a PhD. I don't
Right.
think I met anybody there who actually wanted to stay in academia. Maybe one
Okay,
or
so these
two.
people just wanted to keep. Okay, because this is different. This is different from I studied political science at UCLA. So the assumption was everybody who was there for a PhD wanted to get an academic job, and you're saying that these people were thinking in terms of either completing their masters or getting a PhD, but not necessarily becoming a professor.
I think so. Like I definitely did not do not want to be a professor. And most of the people I met there, I mean, a lot of them were like just people who were like, oh, I just need this. I'm just going to do this, and it's my next credential. I studied communications in my bachelor's. Now I'm getting a master's, and either that will somehow lead to like a job, maybe they thought, or they're just
Well,
that's
is it sometimes it's explicit, like in the U.S., like when you're a teacher, like you would get like a master's, and then they'll give you like a raise, or like you'll have some promotion. Sometimes it's very explicit,
yeah,
like
but
you
there's
need the
nothing like
master's.
that. I don't think there's anything like if I'm wrong, someone tell me, but I don't think there's anything like that in the world for a degree in communications. Like
Uh,
I don't think
you
there's
could
any
imagine
reason.
some stupid government where it's like if you have a master's, we just bump your salary. I mean, that's believable to me.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. So the idea just being like if you have one up in the credentials or whatever, you get one up in the salary. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's certainly possible. Although again, like when I talk to people, no one said that to me.
Uh-huh.
It's possible that was
So they were
that
just
was
clueless. They were just like, just
yeah. I mean,
whatever.
people
I'm just
say
gonna
why are
get
you studying? It's because I'm interested in this, or
yeah.
it's and so it just sort of seemed
Interested.
like
Yeah, you can watch a YouTube video, right? If you're interested in something, right? That's not an answer.
yeah, and so that was sort of the first thing, and there were also people there where it was like it just didn't even make sense. I mean, I met a person there who that was their second master's degree in communication science.
Yeah.
A bright guy, but I was, so something just sort of felt a little bit off, I would guess,
Yeah. One thing
from the
is
get go.
interesting. You told me this was an internet. This was like a very international. Can you talk about sort of the backgrounds of the people you were with?
Yeah, I would say like about half of them were probably Chinese, and
Half. Wow. Yeah.
I think maybe there's and also some Koreans. Like so maybe there's in those countries more of a need for those degrees or something. It's just certainly possible, or just the idea of communications is more valuable.
I think it's just the
Um,
idea of staying. I just think the education, trying to get as much schooling as possible, is sort of the idea. I don't think it's necessarily communications.
it might be, and it was so interesting to me. I met people there who had been journalists or had worked at top companies and stuff, and they're back in school.
Uh,
After like working actually in communications for years, or back in school getting like their second degree or whatever, and I don't know. I mean, I think there are, good justifications for getting a degree. One could be just you are super passionate about a topic. Another could be it's going to get you some job, or you want to be a professor or something. But I honestly, my evaluation was really just most people were just kind of there to be there, and hadn't really thought about it too much. This just seemed like the logical next step.
mm, yeah. Okay. So yeah. So you got there, and well, yeah. What else? I mean, what else? So the people just didn't know what was there, and like, what about the sort of the kinds of learning, because this was very interesting. You would think, I think that like some people think in academia, like, okay, you're losing some things. You're losing maybe the ability to make more money, or you're losing the ability to sort of you know whatever, maybe you're sacrificing something for political reasons. You can't sort of express yourself as openly as you want in public life. But I think the payoff is you're supposed to be able to explore truth. You're supposed to find something true about the universe that doesn't necessarily have a directly instrumental application, like something that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in the private sector. No one is going to hire you to discover the causes of World War II or whatever it is. And so, like, that was my thinking in academia. Was it yours? And sort of how was your experience, different?
Well, it's interesting because I mean, maybe in some sense, like I'm kind of a practical person, so I'm always interested in like why are we doing this? What is the point?
Right.
You know, so like, does this have some instrumental value? But I also am, also just curious about like why are things the case? Why do we act the way we act? But I definitely felt like the stuff that we were learning or being taught just didn't have really either kind of value in the sense that it was like not instrumentally useful. You couldn't really use it to predict anything or to like it didn't. The literature on political communication stuff like did not seem like it would be useful in a political campaign. It seemed mostly
Yeah.
to be kind of oh, if you if you like posted about a protest on social media, there's like a 10% chance that you're more likely to go. Like stuff like that, where it's just like you don't need a degree to know that, and
Yeah.
someone didn't need to write a paper on that. Um, and then in terms of the more descriptive stuff, like that was actually I felt totally missing because I think there is sort of value in say like a really clear description of institutions, how they operate, how the organizations and structures kind of go together. But that was just like totally absent. Like nobody really talked about or cared like how the media actually works, who works in
Yeah.
political media, how you get a paper published. Um,
So
so
it
I don't
says
know.
it said like the drunk. I mean, it
All,
said like the
all of
drunk looking under the lamppost for the keys. So like we can do a survey with just like people. We can have group A and group B and give one of them a treatment and or do a survey and see how So we're focusing on individuals, and then we can say something about them. We could say this is difference between conservatives and liberals, or people interested in politics, people not interested in politics, or people who receive this treatment or that. And so we focus on that. I think this is it sounds like what's happening in communication, but I think this is also part of political science. And then we just sort of, but then we like, is that important, right? That's not how the world works, dividing people into two groups and then giving them a treatment, right? There's like a dynamic. So like if you look at like how conservatives think or how liberals think, there is, there's messages from the top, there's like social media, people talking to each other, there's polarization where people are reacting to the other side. Um, and whether people get involved, it's also complicated. And so we just study like these individual, humans in isolation. It's like studying the atoms, and trying to understand like how it rains. It's not. It's like it's ultimately rooted in atoms, right? But that's just not the right sort of level of analysis. And I feel like this is a problem with political science.
definitely in political science too. Like I'm more familiar with the kind of political behavior stuff and political psychology, and it's an issue. I think what it really is like I mean, it's so baked in at this point. It's in the language we use. We'll say, well, liberals are more likely than conservatives to do something, and we rarely ever talk about how much more likely. A good example is there was this like study going around recently that was looking at, I think, racial discrimination in emailing or something, and like they sent out I guess thousands of emails to different people, and they changed whether the sender was appeared to be black or white or whatever. And like they did find evidence of racial discrimination, but it was like a tiny amount. It was like a couple hundred emails of like tens of thousands sent. And yet,
Yeah.
when you look at how they write about it, they say, well, they're more likely to be discriminated against.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this
it was
language
funny
of
because
more likely is just it's everywhere, and people
yeah,
don't care about the actual amount at all.
yeah. I mean, I looked at the thread of the person, and I looked a little bit at this paper. And it's so funny. It's like this is called he called it paper cut racism. It's like maybe this is not huge, but it's just like you're facing racism, so you're having a million paper cuts, and that's why you're poor and you have discrepancies between groups. So it's just a story that's made up. It's not proven, right? It's just a story. You found this tiny difference, and I'm sure. Look, I want to go back and analyze this data. Somebody should do this if you're listening. I want to see if there's a male-female difference. I would guess. I would guess there's some difference, and if the difference was in favor of males, they would have reported that. So the fact that they weren't emphasizing this makes me think the advantage was for females, because no difference is probably unlikely in a big enough sample size. So somebody go back and look and see if there's a female advantage. Maybe I'll do it by the time this is out. And so it's very stupid. And you could have done different races. You could have done like Chinese, and you could probably find that. And guess what? Chinese are much richer and better educated than white Americans. If there's the 0.1% chance their email doesn't get responded to. What if they were white? That apparently did not hold them back, and society still functions, right? So there's so much going on here. This is this thing is obviously so political. What they want to believe, and they build these mounds of research based on the narrative.
Well, the narrative is correct. Like I think fundamentally social scientists are really storytellers, or at least most of them. That's what they want to do.
Yeah.
Like what they really like to do is they like to have some kind of story or narrative or something. I don't mean that in a cynical way. I just mean like
But the story is,
handful of
yeah, the
credit.
story is good. But you should start. The story is actually, we should spend more time debating the story actually than like this. Whether emails, are, if there's a little percent chance that you're going to, because yeah, the story that groups their outcomes are determined by small acts of discrimination as they go through life. I think that's a terrible story. I don't think that's very logical. And once you don't buy that story, you don't even do the email thing because it doesn't matter. Like who cares,
Hmm. Yeah. So like, if the story is a certain way, or if like society tells a certain story about something, which we have a million stories. Like, I think what you end up have happening is you've got a group of people who believe some story or want some story to be bigger, and then they do these studies, and like the truth is, if you're trying to do a research project on some social thing, like you can look in your you can Google or look in the library or whatever, like you can find evidence that kind of supports everything. Like, this
Yeah,
is not true for every subject per se, but for most things, things just point in different directions. It's all over the place. And so when you have that kind of body of knowledge on like most topics, you're just really gonna end up with, okay, whatever sort of matches the story or helps me tell a better story. Like, that's the evidence I'm gonna choose. My own studies I'll design in this way, and then
yeah,
I'll just frame whatever results I get. That racism email study could have been framed in the story of like, actually there's very little discrimination, and even what there is, isn't that big a deal or whatever. I'm like, just whatever way you frame it is
yeah. I
really
mean, but you,
more account
and
for the
it's sort
result.
of the results beforehand. So nobody does the study where like you send uh, identical SAT scores to a university and see who gets in because we know what the results would be. The results are going to be black people have a massive advantage relative to white people, and you can and so like sort of like yeah, there's like such a universe of like things you could test, and often what the answer is going to be, or you have like some idea, and then you're just doing the stuff that will support your story. But the big story, right? The narrative, the narratives. That's what we should be debating, and we can't because it's sort of like it's if they'll say you're ignoring the data because they have all this quote unquote data which is based on them framing the question and looking exactly where they want for to get the results. And then it's sort of seen as unscientific. If you're a blogger, you can just say I have a theory about the way the world works. But if you're academic, it's like, oh no, you need your but it's like so what if it's like it's better, I think, to investigate things that are, it's harder to prove than to, quibble over things that don't matter. And you need to really think carefully about whether the things you want to study or the things you're looking at or the data that you're analyzing actually matters. There's no uh, there's no neutral social science. So some people are like, oh, so take politics out of social science. Like, I don't agree with that. I don't, you can study anything. You can study like how the speed that your fingernails grow based on what country you live in or based on your ancestry. No one does that because no one cares, right? There has to be
Yeah.
some relevance to humanity to progress or explaining the world or something. Um, and so, yeah, it can't be apolitical or free of values. But I think the problem with academia, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, it's just the values and the narratives are just wrong. That's it. I mean, that's it. They're just wrong narratives, and we need narratives, but they should be true narratives.
Yeah, I like, if I, somehow had magical powers and I could sort of set up academia any way I wanted. I mean, I would basically make it be about mostly just trying to find like null results and categorize them, because like the truth is that there are all of these narratives out there about how the world works, how we work as people, how institutions work, and like almost all of them are probably wrong. And the truth, like especially the ones that get a lot of attention because they're so crazy, right? Which is like kind of shown by the replication crisis, how the stuff that fails to replicate is often the sort of crazier, most interesting stuff. So like, I just think there's a lot more value in sort of selectively saying, okay, what is the narrative, and then just trying to like show that it's false consistently. And there's great books that do this. Like, one of my favorites is, I think it's Hugo Mercier or I don't know how to pronounce his name. Probably Mercier. Not Born Yesterday, which is just like all about how like persuasion like largely doesn't work in the way we think it does. Political ads don't work well. Most ads don't work well. People can't just be duped into things. And if you read the book, like, it gets boring after a while because it's just him going through all of this data, just being like, this isn't how you think it is. This isn't how you think it is. None of these things matter. People are just making their own decisions for the most part. And that book, I think, did get some attention because it was really well done. But I think most social science should just be like that. It should be like, okay, what is the common narrative? And then like, is there any proof at all that X actually does correlate with Y, or X does cause Y? Because just like most of the time, like, it's just really not there.
Yeah, I mean, but it might. I mean, everything affects everything because, like, it's like, yeah, I give you a message. It's going to have some effect on you. It can have zero. Like, zero is not possible. And maybe it's significant, maybe it's not. But I think that the thing is most things are small. I don't think most things are zero. You can't prove they're zero because just like zero is hard to achieve because anything is gonna have an influence on you. It might be negative, right? You might do this advertising, and the person might not like it, but zero is very unlikely. Is it true that basically what's the latest research? Does advertising just not work? Is that what people think now?
I think, yeah. I mean, if you look into it, it's a little more complicated. Like some studies show like a non-linear relationship where the first couple times you see the ad, it's better, and then you get bored of it or whatever. But what I took away from his book was just like for the most part, these things like don't work well. They don't work systematically. Obviously, there's always going to be an effect, and everybody's different, right? So you can have individual differences. Maybe one car ad really appeals to you and not to me. But for the most part, the message I took away from his book and from some other research I've read is just that like companies way, way overinvest in advertising.
Yeah.
And, the kind of classic like Edward Bernays sort of way of thinking about ads and propaganda and persuasion and stuff is just totally wrong.
Yeah. So Mad Men, they were not doing real science. They were just
Yeah,
sitting there.
probably not. And it doesn't mean what people like that do or don't do isn't art. Like there's still an art to that. There's an art to design. But I think social science doesn't really acknowledge that. It's just like does this work or not, which is fine. If you want to get into what is a good advertisement or a good message or whatever, like that's almost to me separate from like whether it.
So if it's so is the objective quality? I mean, is Coca-Cola, right? So Coca-Cola is popular. Is it just it tastes good? I mean, is there just more to the objective, sort of the competence of like fulfilling your purchase orders and like having logistics to like get your product out there, plus the product being good. That's sort of like an optimistic message about capitalism, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, that's
Coca-Cola is just good. I mean, it's just good. Pepsi is good. I mean, people like it.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
and then
bad. Maybe it gives you diabetes, but it brings you pleasure at least. Like most things people buy.
yeah, and then part of it is also brands, right? Like even if like I think when they do like taste tests, people can't really tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi
No,
very
Pepsi.
easily.
I've heard Pepsi wins. Yeah, you could tell
Oh, really?
yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think I heard Pepsi wins, but Coke is more
Okay,
popular actually. Yeah.
that's interesting. But that shows sort of maybe the power then of brands as well, right? Which is, do people like it? Do they know it? What do they associate it with? Right? Like Coca-Cola gets associated with, throughout the years, like lots of different things from Santa
Yeah,
Claus
this
to.
was funny because there was a Pepsi ad campaign I think where they highlighted this, and so I always like Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, because but this makes me feel good about myself because I'm not influenced by Coke is supposed to be better, right? Uh, so yeah, there was something called the Pepsi challenge. So Pepsi went around promoting and trying to show people that if you actually drink, so Coke wins, the brand wins, or the advertising, or like the label, whatever the design. But how do you get? I mean, how do you get it in the first place? How do you get the brand name? How does that become popular? Is it sort of a thing where you have to, if it's established, once it's established, it doesn't matter, or is it like is it just sort of more random and the advertising never matters?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably like what comes first, and then what kind of gets in there first probably makes a big difference. Um, I don't think the argument is that the advertising doesn't matter at all, but I think it's more like the advertising is showing people a product which they like either will like or will not like, and people
Yeah,
quite quickly after they try the product or see other people try the product, like get a sense of that. So you can have the best ad for the worst product, and for the most part, it's people just aren't that persuaded by things um, in that way. Now, maybe that's not true for everything. I'm sure like there probably are certain ads in history, right, that have been really successful and really pushed a certain product or gotten people to buy something. But again, I think it's not in a systematic way where you can necessarily copy what that ad does and then like use it in your own ad.
yeah,
That's my takeaway at least, because it's like the
yeah,
ad, it comes at a certain time, in a certain place, shown on certain channels. It's not a systematic sort of thing.
yeah. So when you back to like your story in academia, so when you left, I mean, how did people respond? Was there any sort of, because there's a sort of stereotype in American academia where like if you're a PhD student and you decide to do something else, it's sort of seen as a failure. Like people in academia think like academia is the only thing that matters or the only thing that's valuable. Like how did your fellow students, and professors respond when you left? And this was recent, right? When did this is not like
Yeah.
something that happened years ago. When did you leave graduate school?
I think like I actually left in October or maybe November, but I was
Okay,
kind of like I was not going to classes and stuff,
yeah,
and
you were playing hooky. Yeah, you
yeah.
got bored. So,
Um, well, my family, like, they were pretty supportive. My dad is also a grad school dropout. He dropped out to start his own business, so he
uh-huh.
kind of understood.
Yeah,
Um, the other people in the program were sad, because like I think I was like one of the people who actually like seemed to care the most about what we were doing and would get really into the literature and read everything and criticize it, and it was fun to debate. Um, but like my best friend in the program at the time, he said, "Yeah, I get why you're leaving. Like you don't seem to respect any of this. You're reading these papers and criticizing them, and you're sort of asking these very skeptical questions, and it's just probably not the right place for you." And I said, "Yeah, that's about right." Um, but no, I mean nobody saw it as a failure. I think they were more confused because they were like, "You've talked about social science and academia constantly for the last couple of years. Why would you so suddenly just like switch?" And I think the reason it was so sudden for me is because, the school I went to for my undergrad was not like it wasn't like a famous school or necessarily considered a good school by any sort of quantitative measure. I think it's quite low. So I kind of imagined, okay, I'm going to go to someplace more prestigious. The methods will be better. Like everything's going to be better. Just kind of the view that everything is better one step up.
yeah,
And then it just wasn't. And I was like, okay, if it's not really going to get better, then I don't want to stick around here.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it does. It's yeah. But how about the professors? Were the professors like? Do they have anything to say? Do they try? I feel like they have like an incentive not to. Sort of feels like this could lead to like some kind of domino effect. Where like the next person is like, "Hey, this is stupid." Jonah left, and then the next person does, and then they have nobody in the program. Did you ever get the feeling that that was a concern?
Yeah, I actually kind of sense that. Like, I'm not that confrontational a person, so I was like, I didn't try and make a big fuss about it or anything like that. The professors weren't like sad that I had left or whatever, but they were just more like, I don't know. We didn't really talk about it, and I didn't want to like say to their face all the stuff I'm necessarily saying. Just because like I've had those conversations with professors and people before, and like I genuinely kind of feel bad for them. Like just because I
Oh,
think they feel stuck in all this stuff too, and just like this is all they know.
but you should. I mean, is that a good way to look at it? Because they're like, okay, so I went to law school. I went to University of Chicago Law School, which is probably a good investment for most people who can go to University of Chicago. But without a question, like if you go to a lower ranked law school, I think it's a pretty bad idea. I think there's something like twice as many JDs graduating each year as there are available, and it's like this in academia too. There's many more PhDs in their jobs, and if you're a school at the bottom, people are not going to find a job that they're training for. And sort of I feel like what kind of person you have to be to sort of know you're like doing that, right? To be involved in that, to like be teaching at a university, and like you're stuck too. Like all you did was get a degree, and now all you can do is like encourage other people to get a degree. But there's still something immoral about that. I don't feel sorry for them. I still think I feel like people doing that are doing something wrong.
I mean, I don't totally disagree. I think it's a little more complicated just because I think they see their role as also, well, I'm an educator or I'm giving people skills. And like I certainly myself, benefited from some of the people who
Yeah.
took me under their wing, professors in undergrad. And I'm very grateful to them for, like getting me to learn R and basic things like that. Um, but I don't know. I mean, it's my experience has been challenging people on this stuff. We're trying to talk about it. Doesn't necessarily lead anywhere. People don't just say like, "Oh yeah, I totally agree with you." Like it's I should just quit my job, and you guys should all quit their job. Like I think people are pretty locked in, and in various levels. I mean, could it be worth it for someone like myself to make a statement or something? Like probably. I'm just temperamentally not that kind of person
Yeah.
to do that. Maybe.
I mean, I've had a few experiences where I think I've given people like honest advice on something, and they've changed like something fundamental. Um, Like all I can think of now is a silly example with a girl with like a haircut, and that's all I can think of right now. But I know there's something in my past that's a little more substantial than that. Well, haircuts are important. Uh, but yeah, I think sometimes we can actually. I think we can. I've influenced people's political views. I think pretty substantially. People I've known. But that's not like changing your career or something. So that's like a little bit less directly related to self interest. Um, yeah. Well, another thing, I mean, another interesting aspect, that of your academic career that we've talked about, and I think we share this view on is, you write this in your essay. There was no like, it's just sort of setting the background for people. Like, I'll have people who like talk to me and say, I wanted to like this tweet, but like, I'm an academic, and I'm so scared. And it's like, people under their own names in business and academia and all kinds of things like my tweets, and I've never heard of anybody getting in trouble for it. So maybe they did. So like, but a lot of people I think are very, very cautious, especially in academia. They're afraid of saying the wrong things. I mean, CSBI, is a little bit, is not afraid of controversial issues or, taking people on. But you said, you worked for us while you were getting your degree, or while you were studying in grad school. And one thing you said was there was no ever hint of like political discrimination, or like, people were like, didn't like you for your views or what work you were doing outside of it or anything like that. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Is that
Sure.
accurate,
I mean,
first of all? And yeah,
yeah,
and
I
later.
think that's accurate. I mean, like, I think the truth is that the kind of level of like, conservatives or right wing people or whatever getting discriminated against is probably different place to place. Like the place where I did my undergrad was like super left wing overall, and I had professors say just crazy things, and it was like kind of controversial to say there's only two genders,
Yeah.
or in a class, in a psychology class, to be like, maybe the reason that women do this thing more than men is like just because they're women. Um, but like nothing bad ever happened to me. I would just like make my point. People would get mad, and that's kind of the end of it. And for quite a while, I was kind of freaked out about it. Like, what if something bad happens? And then, um, I think it was maybe a post by like Razib Khan or something, just saying like he talked about how he'd always used his own name, and just been like proud to say what he says, and not have to worry about it. And I said, yeah, that's kind of who I'd rather be.
Yeah.
So after that, I was just like, okay, I'll use my own name on Twitter or whatever, and I'll just try and say what I think. And like, it's not like I had the most controversial opinions, the things I was saying. Sometimes, like one time I was in a group meeting, and the professor said, I want us to do, what are they called? Positionality statements, where, at the top of our research work, we say I'm a, hetero, a cis white male or whatever, and have this kinds of privilege and don't understand this and that. And, and I was like, I don't want to do that because I like believe more in color blindness. And, that got like some pushback, but like for the most part, like if you're afraid of saying, there are two genders or basic things, like you should just know, like most people agree with you, I think. And if
Oh,
they
I
don't
don't know
agree
if
with
that's
you, at
true.
least they kind
Yeah.
of like respect
Yeah.
you. And, you
I
know,
don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's different. I think you were a grad student. I never got a faculty position. Um, I think it's different when you're trying to get a job, because there's, the market is very saturated. There's a lot of affirmative action, and there's also affirmative action for political views, and there's, subconscious bias and all these things. And I think Eric Kaufman's work on like faculty, like, yeah, it's not fake. Conservative faculty feel discriminated against, and I think it's right. Um,
I'm not saying it's fake. I'm just like, I'm just asking, like, if you're in a class or you're in a
Yeah,
situation,
I think
like,
if you're a class, if you're a
how much
student,
how much
yeah.
pushback do you get for saying something really basic that most people believe?
No,
Like,
but
there are two.
nobody cares. Most students don't care
Yeah,
enough to like try to cancel it. Now, somebody might, but even that is like it's like being hit by lightning. It's like something that's very rare, and like somebody's not going to come after you. Now, academia, I think, is different from other things. Like, I think that what even Steven Pinker said, don't just if you want to be in academia, just don't say anything controversial until you get tenure. And I think that's right, but I think the advice should be, don't go into academia. It's like you, if you want to have any freedom to say, like the whole point, like the selling. Okay, if you're going to academia, you're going to make less money than other fields. You're going to have worse job prospect than what somebody with your intelligence can do. You're not going to have control over like where you can live. You might be able to only get a job in like some university in the middle of nowhere. You might not be able to get a job in whatever city you want. Um, and you're going to have to study for a long time. So there's a lot of disadvantages, and the advantage that has to make there has to be an advantage that makes up for that, and that has to be like truth or like intellectual freedom or honesty. And if like academia is not even providing that, and it's like worse than other fields, then you should run away from academia. It's just very very easy. And if we're talking mostly people in the social sciences. Like I think most of good social science work. I don't think you need like giant labs and like millions of dollars worth of equipment. That's not how it works. If you're a researcher in biotech. Maybe you still want to. Maybe you want to go academia, maybe private sector, whatever. I mean, I don't have experience there, so don't take my advice on that, or physics, or the hard sciences where you need sort of the institutional support. Um, but for the stuff I know, social sciences and generally, like it's hard for me to see the advantage of academia unless your work is unless your work is so abstract and like has no connection to anything. But like, okay, I think if you went out there, so I've looked at like things like history books. Like the best selling history books these days are not by historians. They're by they're by basically journalists or people who are like professional writers. And like, even if you wanted to study like World War I or World War II, which is like, no corporation is going to hire you to do that. I think having a blog and just putting it there, I think if you, I think you can make a living doing that now. It has to be specialized. Look at Razib's Substack. It's all about ancient history and DNA through ancient, very dense stuff. You would think there would be no audience for that, but there is. Razib's doing great. Um, so yeah, I mean, and if you want to start, and so, but so like, yeah, if you want to do that, like, and you have something that's interesting enough that other people will pay attention to, they'll do it. Now, if you want to study like, you know, uh, women, the history of women or the history of trans individuals and like the Civil War or something, like, there's probably not going to be much of an audience for that. You might need academia to do that, but like, that's also like a sort of a stupid thing to study. And those people aren't listening to us now. So people who want to do that, they're gonna go to academia anyway. They're not worried about the political bias because they buy into what academics are selling. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to find your niche if you can, right? And for a long time, the only place you could sort of find people studying those niche things would be like in academia, because those are the only people getting any funding. And in terms of even just getting library books and things like that, right? Like that wasn't necessarily super easy.
yeah, right.
Now with the internet, Mechanical Turk, like you can do surveys really easily. Um, and there's also, I think, a cost to spending too much time in academia, just kind of doing the normal social science research, which is, I think, it also kind of warps your view of like what research is or should be. I mean, I still, in some sense, feel like I'm recovering from this, like, because it's like when I think, okay, it's time to research something, like all I just think about is like, okay, how does X correlate with Y? How could I, ask this in a survey form and then put the data into R and get some, kind of output. And it's like I didn't always used to think like that. I used to think much more in terms of like big picture questions and stuff. And honestly, like academics tell you very explicitly, like, don't do that. Don't think in
Yeah,
terms of big picture. Um, and I mean, like I've heard PhD students use this analogy. They're like, well, what we do is we put one brick in the wall, right? Like that's what we're constantly doing. Is every day, we get up, we run these stats, and then like publish something, and that's one brick in the wall that's like building up this knowledge. And I mean, I'm not a historian of science or anything like that, but it just seems to me like most breakthroughs come from someone just like smashing through the wall and being like, actually, it's this.
yeah,
And whether they're right or not, like that is usually how like things actually progress and move forward.
yeah.
Freud
And I
is an
think,
example.
yeah,
Like academic psychologists like did not like Freud at all, and he was just like, nope, sorry, I'm psychology now. And
uh-huh.
then everyone just started
Yeah,
using his ideas,
yeah.
whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, exactly. And like, I think they don't realize this. If it was like, it's a sort of like one way to look at this is it teaches intellectual humility. You're just like, it's not going beyond what the evidence says, but that's not how it operates. It's like they build a brick in the wall and they believe the wall. It's like a Lego set, and then they believe in the wall, even if they're like humble about their own research. I only like put this little brick in, but still the wall is something real, right? And off they don't get like how easy it is to build a fake wall. like how easy it is to build like a virtual wall that is like not based on anything, but it's just a bunch of people who think alike and are studying this question in the exact same way and right
Mm.
cutting corners in the exact same places and not using the best methodology, and you get a wall and it's just you need somebody to come in and kick it over. So it's like the worst combination. It's like humility, but it's like a fake humility. It's like still devotion to like the narrative. The narrative, it just becomes strong and it can't be questioned because everyone is like, that's not your job. Your job is another brick in the wall. That's all it is.
Yeah, and like even when all the evidence points in like the opposite direction of the narrative, like it still doesn't matter. People still keep putting bricks in the wall. I
Yeah.
mean, like one of the most fundamental changes in my thinking about any topic was when I was in like my I think second or third year. I took a class in criminal psychology, and like before I took that class, I was very much like kind of defund the police, like we need to invest more in these programs and things
What
like
year?
that.
When was this? How old were you when this happened?
I guess 19 or 20 or whatever.
Or is this like your
And
freshman or sophomore year?
yeah, like second or third year. And anyway, so like I took this criminal psychology class, and like I would actually look at the studies and read them, and like almost all of the studies would just show that these things, like these programs and stuff, like don't work very well. And even when they did work well, the sample size would almost always be tiny, so like you didn't really know if it was actually good or not. And the follow up would usually just be like 6 months, right? So it'd be like, okay, like we have this treatment and it prevents recidivism rates in this population for like at least 6 months by like maybe 10% or something. And just tons and tons of research like piling up that just shows this. And so the conclusion that I came away from this class was just like, okay, like most of these programs don't work at all. Most of these things like don't seem to work. But that's not the conclusion that like I think most researchers take away from this stuff, or the students or the professors. They're like, no, we're just slowly getting there. We're slowly figuring out like the best way to do this. And there's still value in all this stuff. It's just one brick in the wall at a time. Even when at least from my perspective, the evidence just seemed to point in the direction of like this stuff doesn't work. Like why do we care so much since all the evidence seems to point that it doesn't work?
Yeah.
Well, it's because we want it to work. We'd like it to work. It sounds
Yeah.
nice if it works.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, yeah. I mean, this is so yeah. I mean, do you have any like advice for people who are thinking about grad school or in grad school or thinking about an academic career besides what we've said, which is pretty negative? Is there anything for the other side, or is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would say do what you have to do to get the job you want. So if there is some job that you really want, if you really need to, if you like want to work at the CIA and you need like a master's degree in something, political science or something to work there, like I don't know if that's true. But
Yeah,
if that's the case, like do what you have to do. I'm not saying there's no reason. I would say if what you really care about is truth and you really want to understand people and society and stuff, like be academic, but like don't keep going. Like just spend your time doing other stuff, and then like on the weekends like read the articles you want to read, and find people you can discuss them with. I mean, it's never been easier. And what you said at the beginning about just reaching out to people, like that's totally true. I mean, I think part of the reason that we connected and I've been a good fit is just like I have very sort of similar interests to the kind of stuff CSBI does, like the political psychology stuff and the open science stuff, and the institutional stuff. Like, it's just kind of like, okay, you guys do niche stuff. Cool. Like that appeals to me. So if you have a certain niche, if you really like a specific kind of history or something, just, yeah, reach out to the people who do that stuff, try and make friends with them. And also just like do your own research. I mean, it's really like I spend a lot of time taking online classes on Coursera and stuff, just like learning random skills. Like it's really, you can do it for free. It's not expensive.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
I think
learn
it's
basic stats. Learn basic. Yeah, you should learn like the equivalent of like a few graduate schools. Graduate. Don't be intimidated by it. A graduate class in statistics, I think, is very valuable. You just need it for basics. But yeah, the niche stuff is important because like academia, they box you in. So I was studying international relations, and I've become that work gets a lot of attention. But the fact that I'm not in academia, I can spend a lot of time splitting between not just like things within academia. They want you to hyper special, like just across fields. Like I could talk about American politics, I could talk about culture, I could talk about whatever social science, psychology, whatever I want basically. And you're so if you have broad interests, it's just really, really bad. I mean, academia just doesn't work. I mean, you have to have like very narrow interests. You have to sort of believe in the narrative, and you have to whatever narrative of the field, and like that's sort of the only practical way for it to work. And we're not even talking about like the job prospects, which are absolutely terrible. Like as bad as you think they are, they're like they're much worse. And so I think I just want to emphasize that too. You'll probably hear that from other places, but yeah, that's something you should keep in mind. So, anyways, so yeah, I just let's spend the rest of the time, I guess, talking about CSPI and like what we've been doing. So, can you talk about sort of I'll leave it as you as the communications director. I'll give you the job of sort of tooting our horn a little bit and saying what are some of the more impressive things we've done this year.
Sure. Well, I'd say that this year has been, we've only been like operational for 1 year. I think you started November 30th
Something
of
like that. Yeah.
2020, right?
Uh-huh.
And in that time, I think sort of the mission has been, okay, how can we improve conversations on even just a few topics? How can we get people thinking in a way that's interesting, novel, more rigorous, and is different? Because there's all these issues people have to deal with now, like COVID or wokeness, or just the fact that society seems to be kind of falling apart. We've got a whole fake class of experts and people who think they know a lot because they studied a lot, who like have no idea what they're doing, and it just sort of seems like a lot of the old kind of traditional ways of thinking about the stuff like have not been super fruitful. Because like with a lot of the issues, it just seems to be like the only thing people can do is say, okay, I guess this is as good as it gets, and maybe they'll write about it on Twitter or something, but people don't actually feel like there's any levers they can pull, any things they can do, any changes they can make. Um, and with regards to things like you were saying earlier, like conservative discrimination in academia, or whether COVID interventions work and things like that, there also, I think, just hasn't necessarily been a great space for people to do like high quality research that focuses on those topics. Just because like that stuff is, probably not like necessarily funded that well in academia. But then even outside of academia, it tends to, when people research those things, like it's not always respectable. It's not always done in an institution or a place where we can kind of slap a pretty bow on it and say it's okay for you to cite this in your New York Times article or something. So I think we sort of fulfilled like the dual function there, where on the one hand we're sort of giving people new ways to think about these issues, and at the same time we're doing it in a way that's high quality, that's professional, that's sort of methodologically rigorous and sound, and so that it is something you can sort of share with people, or it is something that people want to talk and write about, even in mainstream publications, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's important to be able to sort of appeal to a broad audience. You can write anti lockdown stuff, for example, like Philippe Lemoine has done, or anti non-pharmaceutical interventions, and you can get cited by people who already dislike non-pharmaceutical interventions. That's easy. It's actually not that easy because they actually have a lot of people who are, always you have a lot of people saying what people want to believe. So even to rise to the top, of what one sect of the population, you often have to be, you have to have some quality to your work. But to reach out to people who don't necessarily agree with you, people who are just sort of open-minded journalists, or people who are or people who are liberal. I think a lot of it is just sort of merit. I mean, if the work is compelling and it's impressive, Philippe's work on lockdowns is just really, really compelling, and I think
Hmm.
smart people see that, and then like not everyone is like can look at statistics and look at statistical analysis, but some people can, and those people can do it, which can give other people permission to cite it. Like Andrew Gelman, who's a famous statistician at Columbia, he cited our work, and so he's somebody people take seriously on anything having to do with statistics or data analysis. And sort of that gives other people permission to cite this. And I think that's that's key. Now, sometimes having academic credentials helps. It's like what it does is it helps you get your foot in the door. People say this is not an idiot. And then but you have like public intellectuals who are there a lot of public intellectuals who have no credentials? And yeah, there are like some of them are like you think of somebody like Andrew Sullivan, people who've been in like journalism. I guess that's they work their way up in a different field. But then like people like on Substack, like like Scott Alexander or like Michael Tracy, who I don't think came up in any institutions at all. I know I'm pretty sure Scott Alexander didn't. I don't think Michael Tracy ever worked for. Did he ever work for a real institution? I don't know. But it's easier today. It's like you don't the credential unquestionably helps. Is it like worth like going 5-10 years to get a credential so you could speak to people, much less 20 or 30 years to become a tenured professor? Is that the best use of your time? Yeah, if you could snap your fingers and get it, sure. But the more direct way I think to have an influence is just to do high quality work, right? Not a lot of
Mm.
it's not like talent is like pretty scarce. Like the number of people, CSPI, we funded a lot of work, and I think our the bottleneck is not like somebody canceling us or like somebody not letting us in the door. Or the ability to fund good work. It's the bottleneck is talent. Like who is actually at the level of Kaufman, who's at the level
Mm.
of Philippe, who can do work as that I think I could do. There's just not tons and tons of people like that, and some people can, and they're like they're scared of their own shadow, and they don't want to do anything because they're afraid of being canceled or someone not liking them or whatever. So to have that talent, to have that work ethic, one thing that these people who have rare talents, one thing you want to do is you want to make it profitable, make them able to earn a living doing this stuff, because there's an opportunity cost. The smarter and more talented you are, the more you can earn doing something else. So something CSBI does obviously is just provide financial support. That's very important. And people who are listening to this, if you can provide, if you want to, if you like what we're doing, if you want to provide, provide funding, we always, looking for more, and we will be, careful stewards and guardians of that money, because we want to support just the highest quality work possible. We're always, we have I think a reputation to maintain. I think we have a standard to maintain, and there's just so much good work that's been done this year. Can you talk a little bit about? Can you talk a little bit about like sort of the yeah? Let's talk about project by project. So Kaufman's work on political discrimination in academia, that was cited by the people who were starting the University of Austin, now Ferguson, and others who were involved with the with it. I mean, it was basically cited in every conservative publication. It was cited in pretty much every intellectual dark web publication. And I think what it did was it showed that you have these things about you have these surveys of like academics and like what they think, but really just bringing to the surface the political discrimination, and from the conservative side, which I think is a very unique contribution that anyone hadn't done before. And then you have Philippe's stuff on lockdowns, which has been cited in the New Yorker, has been talked about at Scott Alexander's blog. I think it's really I cite it now for sort of the the text, the sort of I think it should be the canonical case against non-pharmaceutical interventions. They probably don't work much if they do work, and and they're not worth it. That's the thing. Like anything besides vaccines is probably not worth almost anything. I mean, the major stuff that people talk about possibly doing. Um, and then, yeah, my work on wokeness. I mean, I've seen conservatives talk about wokeness as a legal issue, which this is something that's frustrated me for years. They would talk about it as something that just like was in the air. It was like complaining about the rain or complaining about the Earth revolving around the sun. It just gave you no hope or no ability to think you could ever change it. And I just was able to say, no, look, there's cause and effect. There's things that government do and things that government can undo, and there's a way that government can help like shepherd us or encourage a saner culture, even if government can't get us all the way there. So yeah, I mean, I think we've done a lot on many different fronts this year. We'll be keep doing it next year. And yeah, do you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to add to that, Jonah?
Sure. What else have we done? I think Leaf's work on
Yeah,
the
that was
budget
great too.
funding was pretty big, and could probably be getting even more attention. I mean, it's really interesting stuff there. And yeah, I would say like there's even people we sort of got on the roster who just like I think we've gotten a little bit of out of them, but not as much as we could. Like Zach Goldberg and
Yeah,
stuff.
he's
Like
finishing up his dissertation. Yeah,
he's
we'll see
finishing
more.
his PhD, right?
Yeah,
And he's got like I think he said he had like 500 pages of of research in his PhD or something like that. Um, I think what's been really valuable, just again, is like to have this high quality stuff, but then like it's presented in a way that's nice. Like it's easy to read for the most part. We've got compelling graphics and things like that. It's being taken seriously. Like the thing is, like we're serious people. We can joke around a bit on Twitter or whatever, but we're serious people doing serious kind of science and theory. And I think people pick up on that vibe, that it's not just some bloggers or something, even though maybe that's closer to what where we come from or whatever. But it's the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology. The center. And I
We've
see
got a
that.
serious name. Yeah.
A serious name. I mean, it's it's as simple as that. When people cite us like in articles and stuff, they often say the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology. When people talk about Kaufman's work on like the Hill or something, or on podcasts, the report from the Center for even
Yeah.
just being able to say that, being able to say like we're a real legit think tank,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. I think just it brings like the research, which is already great, just like up another level. And
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
professionalism.
organization, marketing. I think, yeah, you have to, signaling is a lot of like signaling sometimes gets a bad rap because education is just sort of signaling, but it's like a waste of time because you're wasting so much time to use to prove that you're better than someone else where there's probably more efficient and, easier ways to do it. But things like having nice graphics, having, like all your stuff be grammatical, presented in a nice format. That's a signal, but it should be, it should be a signal. You should like take people seriously based on how seriously they take themselves and how much they go out of their way to sort of present it to you. Now I think there's a balance to maintain because like academics spend all their time like getting the citations exactly right and like having that formatted and like speaking, even like, the way the way I speak is different from an academic. Like, I always feel like they are talking in a way they think a serious person should talk. And
Mhm.
that's like, I do too, but it's like, I'm trying to direct people more to the ideas than, just impressed with my ability to, off the top of my head, speaking complete paragraphs. I mean, when I write, it's a different story. But like presentation, as far as like speaking, I think whenever you're doing that, it's sort of fake because you're really not thinking. I think it's impossible to express ideas, well, and in sort of paragraph text form while you're speaking. You can do it, but I think you focus so much energy on the presentation that unless you're like, you're a very rare genius, you are sort of skimping on the quality of the ideas. So like, I
Mhm.
think when I speak, it's a lot of false starts, a lot of I don't know, it's a lot of, oh, I take that back, forget it, that's wrong, because my brain is trying to focus on substance. It's not necessarily focusing on it's not focusing on the presentation, which I think looks bad. Although the writing, I think the presentation is much better. I think it depends on, sort of I don't think I speak my presentation is like works in like a conventional academic environment. But I think that's a problem with the environment. I don't think that's a problem with me or the way I talk.
Well,
Um,
well, I also think it's authentic. I mean, that's a really overused word nowadays,
yeah,
but like there's a lot of people who do research or writing and things like that who can come off as really fake.
yeah.
And just being able to show like, okay, I'm just a normal person who's got some good ideas, and I'm just doing what I can, speaking how I can. There's something compelling about that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when it's combined with, careful thinking when, and when it's called for, when it's necessary to get into a topic or to make an argument, I think that's important. So yeah,
I I also think like CSPI. I'd be curious if other people disagree or what they think, but I think you kind of also popped up at a good moment, which is sort of like at a moment where it kind of felt like the intellectual dark web, in its best sort of incarnation, had kind of fallen apart,
yeah,
and
it's funny.
sort of
That's
the
yeah,
the myth of kind of like the classical liberal, truly neutral center. I think is people are sort of seeing that that's not there,
that's a
and
very good point. Yeah,
I think you kind of and everything we've sort of done, I think it's almost like I don't know, I haven't thought enough about it to sort of say there's like a split. But if there is a split, I would say the split is between people who think the woke craziness stuff is like evil and the people who think it's stupid. And I'm not saying you can't think it's stupid and evil, but like, the people who are like, this is like the
yeah,
the worst thing ever, these people are demons, versus people like, this is like a bunch of incompetent,
Yeah.
crazy people who are over credentialized and like don't know what they're doing. And I think that sort of IDW split, um, is maybe part of why there's been sort of a good audience, because I think a lot of people who've been following these debates for a while, sort of felt like a bit let down after that split, and they're like sort of like, I don't know, do I go towards the evil? The wokeness is evil. These people are evil, or do I like try and look for people who are trying to make sense of this and trying to figure out, okay, like what can we actually do about it? What's the
Yeah.
practical solution?
Well, it's interesting because there's another split too within the evil group of the people who think that wokeness is evil. There's people who've gone crazy and people who have not gone crazy, right? So there's the people who, the people who have become like skeptical of vaccines and just like, just crazy, like into conspiracy theories and all this stuff. So you have that too. And so I think, we're, if we have any thing in common with some of the intellectuals, I think we have a little bit in common, not necessarily a lot. I think I probably have more in common. Maybe, I wouldn't say more in common. I have a lot in common with just American conservatism, American libertarianism. I mean, I don't think I needed an intellectual dark web. I think I already had a sort of a political faction that was, you know, I had problems with, but was close enough to sort of what I believed. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to say like where we are, we're where I am at least, and I think a lot of people around us are, is that yes, wokeness is evil, but we're not going crazy with partisanship. We're not going crazy with, but that doesn't mean there's no like then the people who think it's stupid, they have this. There's also there's also like this hesitancy to do anything about it. Just this idea that like it would be illiberal or fascist to like do anything, like even stop the government from doing woke stuff, which is crazy. I think Andrew Sullivan is an interesting case because he thinks wokeness is evil. I talked about one of his pieces in my Substack where he's like, oh, this is evil, this is the end of civilization, and then like comes out against critical race theory bans. It's like, wait a minute, like you have public schools and they're teaching things that are literally evil and literally going to destroy civilization, and then you're going to say, well, we're liberal, we can't do anything about it. It's like no, like there's government schools, and government schools teach a curriculum set by the government. Like why are you so hesitant to do anything? So he's there's all these different flavors of this, but you're right, the sort of idea that there was just this intellectual, there was these like people who opposed wokeness, and that was like enough. That gave them enough in common to hold together. Like that's gone. Like
Yeah.
you need something more than that, because all 99.9% of humans in history opposed wokeness. Everyone from like Islamic extremists to the Chinese to like Russians to libertarians. So there's nothing there's nothing to hold you there. It's just there's a very strange. There's just this very strange sort of dominant cultural paradigm, and there's a lot of ways to oppose it. Just opposition to it is in and of itself is not practical, because you have to fight something with something, and it's not going to hold any kind of coalition or intellectual movement together.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is like you have to do something. People want someone to do something, right? Like if you've been following these kinds of debates long enough, and also if you look into the history of like how long these debates have been going on, which is I think longer than people realize or think, right? It's and that kind of blends more into the
Yeah, man.
traditional.
So 1960s, the police stuff, like just the fact that the inner cities there'd be riots, like some criminal like gets shot by the police or killed by the police, and then there's riots, and then liberals are saying, "Oh, it's lack of opportunities." That is old, man. That's three generations now. That is, America's been doing that since the 1960s, and then the test, being racist or sexist or whatever. That's always been there. That's been there since the 60s too. I mean that's the 1960s. We're still living in that world, and you could write 1,000 more essays on it. We'll be in the same place in another 60 years. I mean, writing more essays or just talking about it, it's not gonna do anything.
Yeah, people I think are hungry for some kind of solution or at least an exit, right? People are thinking, okay, is there something we can do about this? And if there isn't, is there some place I can go work, or is there some place I can
Yeah,
go
is there
learn?
some kind of parallel,
Yeah,
institutions or economic structures or schools or whatever that people can set up? And the conservative movement in the U.S. has done that to a certain extent. I mean, school choice movement and homeschooling and private schools and things like that. And then there's all kinds of options with people with money. They have gated communities and stuff, but you want to provide that option to more people, given how bad sort of government and established institutions are, especially in the U.S. This probably applies a little less to other places, but also applies to a certain degree.
yeah. I mean, the conservative movement, right, has been good historically at having this parallelism. where okay, they have academia, so we do the think tanks,
Yeah.
right? They have this, we do that, and yeah, that's good. I think sort of what makes us different is sort of like we do have that sort of parallel thing, although I'd say like in terms of officially we're a little bit more non-partisan and
Yeah,
maybe
I
more
mean, we're not, yeah, interested in sort of the paradigm of American politics. It's more,
yeah
it's more sort of status quo critical, critical of sort of the status quo, and it's critical of expertise and these sort of bad ideas, which, are more associated with the left. But, it's not like, we're just saying, oh, conservative principles are going to save us for that. I mean, it requires, careful thinking and, institution building, and not just like, slogans or some prepackaged solution, right? There's just a lot of thinking and work to be done on these problems we see in society.
Yeah, and I think the main thing, what's important, is to give people a sense of hope about some of the stuff. Like I think the conservative movement is, or right wing stuff in general, is like often extremely pessimistic, and that's kind of I think part of maybe
Yeah.
why people get interested in it because they're pessimistic. But people kind of want to think or want to believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And for a long time, there's just been like nobody really who's providing that. It's just like, okay, here's how everything is screwed up and all these problems, and can we actually do anything to fix it? Like no,
Yeah.
you just let this stuff run through the institutions.
Yeah, I think one thing though you have to realize though is a lot of the right wing sort of media and media in general, but they're doing something different from what other people are doing. They're entertainment, so it's like, oh, Saturday Night Live doesn't have a solution to like our problems and it critiques. Like, oh, of course, like, oh yeah, Hannity doesn't have a
Yeah,
solution. Yeah, like, okay, like, yeah, he's Hannity, he's entertaining you, he's making a lot of money and reaching millions of people, and so those people who are like following these popular figures, they're maybe not necessarily our audience. Our audience is a little bit, more, the polite way to say it, this is educated. The way I like to say it is higher IQ, and people who are a little more serious. I mean, I don't think we have to hide behind euphemism like education is the difference. No, it's intelligence and it's actually caring. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what we're aiming for. And there's not a lot of people doing that because, well, partly because there's more of an audience out there for just carnival barkers or just for infotainment. There will always be a bigger audience for that, but it doesn't mean that there's no audience for the smart stuff, right? It's a
yeah.
smaller audience, but it's not saturated yet.
No, and I
And
think
I
I
think
think
that's what
also
we're.
by focusing on the smart stuff too, it's like you said, you've also managed to have a broader audience than like just conservatives, or just ex IDW people, or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
New York Times, like the Atlantic, like even if it is maybe the more conservative columnists in those places who cite us, it's like people are going to read that, and the legitimacy is very important. I think
Yeah.
expanding the audience as
I
well.
think that's right. I think, yeah, knowing that there are honest and sort of smart people on all sides that are worth communicating with. I mean, I think that's something we shouldn't forget. So, yeah, okay. I think it's been a good conversation. I think this sort of peels back the layers. Yeah, peel back the onion. Is that the right way to say peel back the onion? Is that what you would say here? I don't know.
If you're yeah, I guess so. I mean,
Yeah,
oftentimes if you're crying, but
we're crying. We're peeled back that. Okay, whatever. We've given people a little bit of sort of an insight into how we think about CSPI. Sort of what the vision is, what we're trying to do, as well as giving sort of Jonah's, giving your experience in academia and a little bit about mine too. So, yeah, is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up? Is there any New Year's resolution you have, or anything intellectually you're working on you want to plug, or anything else? The floor is yours.
sure. Well, in terms of sort of my next project, the next thing I want to do is actually like write a report on mental health, just like looking at the public policy stuff and a lot of the empirical literature, and just kind of try and like make the point that I think I made closer to the beginning, which is like a lot of this stuff just really isn't what people think it is. And the mental health sort of industry is also, I think, one of those industries that's like continuously growing and increasing, and has like more and more power, even if we don't necessarily realize that. Um, and I haven't really seen a lot of people like write about that critically from a scientific perspective, but also maybe from like a policy perspective. Like, just to give an example, like there's no evidence that therapists who are more educated are better therapists, and yet like tons and tons of places have strict regulations that your therapist has to have at least a master's degree or something.
Yeah.
So if the goal is actually to help people through therapy, like that doesn't make any sense. And there's just tons of stuff like that. So that's what I'm probably going to work on next. Anything else? Yeah, I would just say if you like the stuff we're doing at CSPI, if you've really enjoyed the articles and the research, then please consider doing three things. The first is like to rate and review our podcast, which is really important just to get us in the rankings and to get more people seeing us. And then the second thing you could do is you could subscribe to our Substack. If you haven't done that, you can subscribe for free or also for like $10 a month. And then if you really like what we're doing, and you really think like that we are providing a lot of value, then think about maybe donating some money, because the truth is like the money is going to go to research. It's going to go to cool stuff, and it's going to go to cool people who are like producing really, really great work. And I'm just saying that because I'm so happy to be working with CSPI and to like be even helping just a little bit on all these projects. It's been really awesome, and looking forward to what we got in the years ahead. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, we're glad to have you, Jonah. All right, it's been great talking. Thanks a lot.
All right, no problem. Take care.